The train derailment of East Palestine, Ohio, is a disaster that everybody should be paying attention to, specifically because of how the government is easily able to lie to you. Now, I'm really worried about this, but I want you to be aware of this. You may have heard many a time already that the EPA is monitoring air quality levels and water quality levels. And the EPA is suggesting, hey, our testing is showing everything is fine. Nothing is outside normal toxic levels. You're good to return home, live in East Palestine, Ohio, drink the water, whatever. But now what I'd like to do is show you how potentially we could be manipulated. First, we believe that a lot of the tests that the EPA is technically conducting are really just tests that are being directed by the EPA for the railroad to conduct. So the railroad is basically subcontracting testing companies. And what kind of tests are they performing? Well, again, air and water tests. But potentially, why could that be a mistake? Well, it could potentially be a mistake because of these things that are called dioxins, which don't actually stay in the air that long. You know what they do? After you burn a plastic, dioxins can go up into the air, and then where do you think they go? They don't necessarily go into the water where they wash away or stay lingering in the air. Where do they go? They go in the soil. And what tests are not being conducted? Soil tests. Yeah, that's exactly how the government can lie to you. In fact, consider this. In the 1990s, there were a lot of chrome manufacturing plants near elementary schools in Pico Rivera, California. And there was one chrome manufacturing plant that was very, very close to the school, within about 1,000 feet of the school's playground. And when you dip stuff into a chrome bath, that chrome bath has a lot of bubbles on it, which leads to the noxious chemicals that are a byproduct, very extremely toxic byproduct of chrome manufacturing, chrome dip manufacturing, which is leading some in California to call for the banning of chrome at all, and chrome plating, right? It's a chrome plating process. You take something, you dunk it in, and then you electrify the solution, and then essentially you're chrome plating. But anyway, those toxins can go into the air. And then where do those toxins go? Well, they don't stay in the air. They settle into the soil. So if you now go turn off the chrome plating process and you measure the air, oh, no chrome toxins detected. Everything's safe. Go back to work, everyone. But wait a minute. What happened at that chrome plating facility that's now closed that was next to the school? Uh-oh, a bunch of the students, about 20 of the students and about 8 of the teachers in the late 90s got cancer, and many of them died. Yeah, elementary school students. Why? Because of the toxic residual remnants that were in the soil, in the kids' playground. That is what matters. But that is exactly what's not being tested. So I'd like to be someone who actually calls out that if you live in Ohio or in East Palestine, or you believe the government, I'll tell you, my tinfoil hat grows by the day, and it's terrible, but my tinfoil hat grows by the day. If the government is so wanting to be so careful, why is soil not being tested? And so what do we have here? Here's a report from a local media station over in East Palestine. And I thought this was really interesting, because here is a couple that runs a farm, and they talk about how they grow, grass-fed beef, they raise chickens, and so on, right? And basically, we know this disaster happened on February 3rd. On February, we had the train derailment on the 3rd. On the 6th, you had the sort of uncontrolled explosion that was designed to be the lesser of two evils. And a lot of this crap went up into the air. You know, they had their lips burning, their eyes were watering, whatever. They left their animals behind. But now they're coming back, and experts are suggesting, wait a minute, why are we not testing the soil? Uh-oh, the rest of the article disappeared. But anyway, the article goes on to talk about how experts suggest, hey, the soil is what should be tested. And what you should be looking for are actually dioxins that sit in the soil. And the problem about dioxins is the EPA considers dioxins to be one of the most 10 toxic chemicals that result from an industrial process in the United States. But the problem with dioxins is there's really no way to get rid of them. The only way you get rid of them is by preventing them from being released from the industrial process in the first place, because dioxins are known to mess with your immune system and cause cancer. And the problem with that is if dioxins are sitting in the floor, they could enter our food chain and lead to more cancer-causing essential introduction of chemicals throughout our entire food chain. And so where do dioxins generally rest in your body? Well, in your liver and in fats. And unfortunately, that's where you can get a concentration of dioxins. Where from? From animals. Because cattle who eat the grass, which is obviously from the dirt, or cattle who eat feed, which is made from, let's say, compressed hay or other things that are grown on the floor, are concentrating dioxins into their liver and in their fats. And eventually, those dioxins will end up on steak plates throughout the country. And that's where you get a concentrated dose of dioxins. Now, look, I'm not saying stop eating animal meat and panic about eggs and chicken and beef or whatever, but I am saying if the government really gave two craps, they would be testing the soil where animals are basically eating and living on the soil. But you know what's actually happening? Take a look at this. Here's a report from the Ohio Star. Forestry workers find animals dying at alarming rates in Ohio parks following East Palestine train derailment. Although Governor Mike DeWine and the EPA continue to assure Ohioans that recent air monitoring and water sample tests have shown no concerns with air quality or water quality in East Palestine following the catastrophic train derailment, forestry workers have found that animals are dying at alarming rates. In fact, apparently a wildlife biologist and consultant for the Federal Forestry Department have reported receiving hundreds of calls on both this Sunday and Monday from colleagues who say forestry workers have found hundreds of dead animals in Ohio's parks. Several labs across the country have received specimens of whole minks, deer, elk, worms, and livers of such animals, and are finding toxicities that are off the charts. Remember, this stuff concentrates in the fats. This is why people say don't eat certain fish, like a top of the food chain fish too often, like swordfish. Why? Because swordfish are like a top of the food chain animal. So what they do is they eat the fish that eats the plankton that eats the potentially toxic plants, right? So the small animals eat the toxic plants. A bigger animal comes along and eats the smaller animal that's been eating the toxic plant, but they eat a lot of the smaller animals. And so they concentrate all of the chemical in their livers. Then they get eaten by a bigger fish or a bigger fish. In the case of here, it would be like chickens eating, plants, and then potentially feed being made out of those chicken and plants, and then cattle eating that feed and those plants, right? And concentrating this, right, into essentially their livers. It's the same thing. It's exactly the same thing. The stuff resides in the fat. But unfortunately, no tests of soils are being conducted. Instead, the governor, apparently, of Ohio is disallowing scientists from getting access to state parks. I kid you not, it says right here. The source also told the Star that DeWine is allegedly blocking scientists from getting into state parks. But the scientists are finding ways to circumvent that. And this is where they're finding dead animals because of the chemicals in the soils. Now, it's a developing story by the, Ohio Star here. Take everything with a grain of salt, or should I say a grain of dioxins? Oh, that's terrible. Too soon. But anyway, we don't know who these sources are, right? We could be suspicious. But let me just be clear. The point of me making or talking about this is to say that the government is telling us everything is fine. No need to be alarmed. We're testing the air and the water. What about the damn food supply or the soil where all the crap is? That's where the toxins are. They fall into the floor, okay? It's like think about it like nuclear fallout almost, right? When there's a nuclear event and somebody puts on, let's say, a radiation suit, nuclear material washes off. You have to wash it off of you because it's heavier. And even though it could stay in the air for a period of time, it usually falls to the soil. And that's where most of the radiation is. This is why you can actually go to like Chernobyl and or any kind of area where there's been a nuclear disaster. And you could measure the air, and the air could be totally fine, or maybe like modestly elevated, but still within safe parameters, right? Then you kick up the dirt, and all of a sudden the radiation goes off the chart because the particles that are the most toxic are actually falling into the soil. They're not sitting in the air or water forever. They're dropping down to the soil. And that's where the government is basically giving us a big middle finger, saying, screw you, we don't even want to know.